What's up everyone, this is Elijah here, and let me welcome you to another video produced by the App Lifestyle, the place where the world is literally in the palm of your hands. And in this video, we're going to be talking about how to increase your Uber Eats tips, because this is a question y'all have been asking ferociously, whether it be in the Facebook group or in the YouTube comments. Now, right off the bat, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. This video may be what some people consider numbers heavy. In fact, for those of y'all that see my second channel, Financial Anatomy, you may be wondering, hey, is this a financial anatomy video? Well, truth be told, if you want to increase your tips, you're gonna have to start looking at the numbers, drawing conclusions, and make adjustments based on those numbers. If you want to increase your numbers in terms of how much you're making, you got to look at the numbers. There's no getting around it. So you might see me referring to my notes right here, because unlike the other channel, I'm going to be making notes for these videos just to make sure I don't leave anything out. So if you see me looking down, that's what I'm doing. Now, before we get into the video, I want to say that there is some videos required that you want to look at before you focus on this one. Reason being is, if you haven't covered the material in the other videos, some of this stuff won't make sense and you might not be positioned well enough to increase your tips. So I have a whole playlist I've already done on how to increase the amount of tips you get. This has little subtle things like how you dress. I'm not going to get into it here because I've already made a playlist. Just, you see the card at the top right hand corner. Click on that, watch those, then you'll be good to go. Another thing that you'll want to have already seen is at least part 3 of the normal Uber Eats course. And it helps if you've seen the Uber Eats Advanced course too, because I will be using some terminology that you might not be familiar with if you haven't dove into those courses. That being said, let's go ahead and get into it. Oh, where's my pencil? Y'all excuse me. Left the pencil on the other side of the camera, but we all good. All right. So the first thing you want to do is, when it comes to increasing your tips, I've said this multiple times. I'm gonna keep saying it until it sinks in. Different parts of your market tip differently for whatever reason. More places may have more money. It's not up to our interpretation why that is, but you got to start noticing the patterns as far as other parts of your market tipping more. Certain parts of your cities may tip more. Certain cities overall may tip more. But if you're not noticing this, it'll just go completely over your head. Then you're wondering why you're not making enough money, because you're hanging out in the areas that, for whatever reason, they just don't tip. There's nothing you can do. You can dress the best you can. You can give them the best service, dress very professionally. They're just not going to give you a tip for whatever reason. Honestly, that's none of my business, but why they don't want to tip, that's not what you're here for. You want to find out what you can do about it. So the key is to focus on the areas that do tip and mainly serve that area, since they are giving you more value for your money, for your effort rather. Now, this is assuming that tips is the biggest contribution of your income. Remember, you got what Uber pays you, the boost, the quest, and then the tips. Now, let's say some of that other stuff isn't in place, so tips mean more in the grand scheme of things. That's when you really want to focus on them. If those other things are into play, then tips don't matter as much. Just keep that in mind. So what you want to do, here's a formula I use to zero in on the areas that offer more tips. And it's a formula that will give you feedback, and then you can use it to project how much money you're going to make off of a trip. I know in certain markets, Uber does show you how much you're going to actually make, but with this formula, it's going to be pretty spot on. So I'm going to read verbatim. The first thing you got to do, you got to decide which one you're going to use this on. So you can use this formula on a quadrant. You can use it on multiple quadrants. So by quadrants, let's say your city is divided into 4, okay? You got northeast, southeast, you get that. So by multiple quadrants, I mean, you find that if you're hanging out in the southeast quadrant and the northeast quadrant, you're getting a particular result. So that's what I mean by multiple quadrants. And this can also be used by whole cities, but you got to decide which one you want to test this on. So you're going to take a week, at least 1 week. Now you can go longer, but preferably just 1 week is enough. Going to test a week. Hang out in whatever zone that you decide to do. We're going to say you're going to hang out in a particular quadrant. Okay. Now that means you're taking orders just from this quadrant, or orders end up in that quadrant. Okay. And you're gonna focus on the trips that come from that quadrant. Now this won't work if you're all over the place. You really gotta focus on somewhere. So it's gonna be a quadrant, multiple quadrants, or cities. Once you've done that for about a week, you're gonna look at all your trips in your dashboard. And you're gonna look at all the tips that you were given. And you're gonna add them all up, okay? So for example, let's say in a week, I did 50 trips. You're gonna take all those 50 trips, look at each trip, or you know what? You don't have to look at each trip because after a week, Uber adds it all for you. So you take the tip number that you see, and that's gonna be your weekly number for tips. You're gonna take that and you're going to divide it by the amount of trips you did. You might be wondering, how is that gonna work since some people tipped and some people didn't? See, what you're looking for is an approximate estimate of tips. What that is, that's another way of saying that based on this data, you can project that you'll make this amount of money in tips for each trip. So for our example, we're gonna use $50 worth in tips, and we did 50 trips. I know you're saying, Elijah, that's simple, it's more complicated, but we're doing it just to keep the numbers relatively flat, simple for this example. But what does that formula look like? So it's the total amount of tips divided by the total amount of trips in that week. So for this example, since we did 50 trips, it would be $50, which is how much you got paid in tips for that week, divided by 50 trips. And that is going to give you $1 per trip. That doesn't mean that each person in those trips tipped. This is the estimate. So now you have what I call the estimated tips per trip. Now you have a number that you can project onto that quadrant or multiple quadrants or a whole city going forward. So what that means is when you see a trip coming in, whether it shows you the amount or not, you're going to add $1 to that trip. And then you're going to decide, okay, is that trip worth it, including this estimated tip? Now, if it isn't, you know to go ahead and pass. Also, with this formula, you'll also know that is this section of the city or is this city even worth hanging around in tips? Let's say you do this formula and it comes out to be like 35 cents per trip. Is that really worth hanging around if a huge portion of your earnings are going to be in tips? Me personally, I would say no. I would probably, you know what, that quadrant, let me avoid it like the plague and go test another quadrant, which I'm getting $1, $2, $3 per trip based on the estimated tip amount. And you can do this for quadrants, multiple quadrants, cities, etc. Now, what you're gonna find out once you do this enough times, you're gonna have a map. You can write this stuff down if you want, or you can keep it all in your head. But you're gonna have a map of places that, okay, I know this area tips well because I ran that formula. I know this area doesn't tip well, so unless Uber Eats wraps a boost in that area or something's going on where I'm gonna get paid other than tips, I'm not going there. So you get a tip there, you get a trip coming from there, you just decline it. You see a trip is going to that quadrant, you just decline it. Because people aren't tipping in that area. It's really that simple, folks. So that does it for this video. Now, I know that was what some people would consider formula or number heavy. But like I said, if you want to increase the numbers, as in increase your green, then you need to start looking at the actual numbers of your dashboard. Most people don't analyze it to that depth, and they'll just keep going off the randomness of tips. But there is a pattern. Some people tip, some people in certain areas of the city rather tip, some people in cities altogether just tip more. And you as a driver need to know this data. The only way to know this data is to actually analyze it yourself, and I've given you the tools to do that. But that does it for this video. I would love to hear your thoughts on this formula below. Also, your thoughts on tipping in general. Has it increased or decreased with these new changes that Uber Eats has done? Me personally, this formula I've said, I guess I've been using it for quite some time. And I've kind of hinted to it in the Uber Eats Advanced course, but I never actually gave you the direct formula. So we have the direct formula. And with any luck, if we start avoiding areas where people aren't tipping, Uber Eats will be forced to wrap a boost around that bad boy then maybe those sections of our cities or that city will actually be worth our while. But that does it for this video. If you haven't done so already, shoot this video a like. It's much appreciated. It helps with the YouTube algorithm. And subscribe if you're new. And if you found value in this video, please give it a share. And consider checking out my second channel, Financial Anatomy. If you really love these numbers and you want to figure out how to make more money and manage money. This is Elijah with the App Lifestyle. I'll catch you in the next video. Peace out.